Emperor Argal showed us the throne as
Grand Regent of Viltrum until one of Argal's heirs can be found.
our strength.
Taught us our greatness. Heirs can be found. Gave us This is my first command. Gave us our destiny. My first, because of him.
Seek out the weakness that allowed this betrayal.
Because of him, all is ours.
That allowed this betrayal. And purging.
All is ours.
Traitor has fled, and he purged it from our midst.
The empire that ruled the stars without fear is about to face something it never prepared for. Not an alien army, not a planet-wide rebellion, but a crack inside itself. A silence before destruction. A moment where even the strongest warriors begin to look over their shoulders and wonder, who will be next? Far across the dark emptiness of space, the Viltrumite Empire stands as a symbol of pure power. They believe they are the final form of life. Strong, perfect, unstoppable. Every world they touch is either broken or rebuilt in their image. They do not ask for permission. They do not show mercy. They only decide who deserves to survive. For thousands of years, no one has been able to stop them. Entire civilizations fall just at the sound of their name. To them, weakness is not forgiven. It is removed, but something is changing. At first, it begins as whispers among the highest ranks. Small doubts that no one dares to speak out loud. Some Viltrumites start to question the endless cycle of conquest. They have already won so much. Yet they keep fighting, keep destroying, keep expanding into nothing but more emptiness. A few warriors begin to wonder if there is more to existence than war. That thought alone becomes dangerous, because in their world, thinking differently is the first step toward death. Trust begins to break. Allies start watching each other instead of their enemies. Missions are completed in silence, without celebration. Even the strongest warriors feel it, a pressure they cannot explain, as if the empire itself is holding its breath. In the middle of this rising tension stands Mark Grayson, connected by blood to this unstoppable race, but shaped by something completely different. Raised on Earth, he carries the Viltrumite strength in his body, but not their beliefs in his heart. That makes him something rare, and something dangerous. To some, he is hope. To others, he is a threat that should have been erased long ago. His existence becomes a quiet reminder that the Viltrumite way is not the only way forward. And then it happens, the moment no one expected, but everyone secretly feared. The Great Viltrumite Purge begins. There is no warning, no declaration, no chance to escape. One moment, the empire feels stable. The next, it turns on itself like a collapsing star. Orders are given in secrecy. Loyalties are tested in blood. Warriors who once fought side by side now face each other with deadly intent. The strongest among them fall first, not because they are weak, but because they are dangerous to those in power. The empire does not fight an enemy from outside. It destroys itself from within. Planets that once bowed in fear now watch in silence as the Invincible begin to fall. Fleets disappear without explanation. Entire squads are wiped out and never spoken of again. There is no honor in this war. Only survival. Only elimination. Only the cold belief that anything unstable must be removed before it spreads. And in the middle of it all, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. The Viltrumite Empire was never unbreakable. It was only waiting for the right moment to collapse. At the peak of their strength, the Viltrumites were not just warriors. They were a force that shaped the direction of entire galaxies. Their rise was not slow or peaceful. It was sharp, fast, and built on one simple belief: only the strongest deserve to exist. From the very beginning, they rejected weakness in all its forms. Mercy was seen as a flaw. Compassion was treated like a disease. And patience was something only the weak needed to survive. They came from a world that demanded perfection. Every Viltrumite was trained to fight from the moment they could stand. Failure was not accepted. There were no second chances. If someone could not match the strength of the others, they were removed. Not guided, not protected, removed. This harsh system created something terrifying. A race that believed suffering was proof of strength. As they grew, so did their hunger for expansion. One planet was never enough. Then 10, then hundreds. The Viltrumite Empire spread across space like a silent storm. They did not trade. They did not negotiate. They arrived, observed, and decided. If a civilization was strong enough, it was tested. If it failed, it was replaced. Entire worlds changed overnight, their leaders gone, their systems rewritten, their people forced into a new order built on Viltrumite law. To outsiders, they were unstoppable gods of war. To themselves, they were something even more extreme. A perfected species chosen by nature to rule everything else. They believed chaos only existed because weaker beings were allowed to survive. Their solution was simple: remove weakness from existence itself. With every conquest, their confidence grew. They began to see resistance as meaningless. No army could match them. No technology could keep up. Even the most advanced civilizations collapsed under their pressure. And so the Viltrumites stopped preparing for war and started preparing for domination. Strategy became unnecessary. Fear became irrelevant. Victory was expected before the battle even began. But perfection built on violence always carries something hidden beneath it. As the empire expanded, something began to shift quietly within its foundation. The constant cycle of conquest never ended, but the meaning behind it started to fade. Warriors who had spent centuries fighting began to feel emptier after each victory. There were no new challenges, only repetition. Planets fell in the same way. Resistance broke in the same patterns. Even destruction started to feel predictable. Some Viltrumites began to question what they were building. Not openly, not at first. Even the thought itself was dangerous. But questions do not disappear just because they are ignored. They grow in silence. Why does an unstoppable empire still feel like it is always fighting? Why does victory never feel like enough? Why does expansion never lead to peace? These thoughts stayed buried in the minds of a few, but they were enough to create distance between warriors who once saw each other as equal. The unity that once defined the Viltrumites slowly began to weaken, not through defeat, but through doubt. The empire still looked perfect from the outside. Fleets moving across galaxies, worlds being reshaped, enemies disappearing without trace. But inside, something far more dangerous than any rebellion was forming. Not an enemy they could fight, not a force they could destroy. Something internal, something silent. And in an empire built on absolute strength, even the smallest crack can become the beginning of collapse. Inside the Viltrumite Empire, weakness was never supposed to exist. It was the one thing they trained themselves to destroy, both in others and in themselves. But over time, something harder to fight than any enemy began to grow. It did not come from outside worlds or rival civilizations. It came from within their own thoughts. At first, it was only a feeling, a small discomfort during victory, a strange silence after battle, a moment where conquest did not feel as meaningful as it once did. Viltrumites were taught to ignore emotion unless it helped them win. So most of them pushed these thoughts away. But ignoring something does not erase it. It only gives it time to grow. Among the higher ranks, loyalty began to shift in quiet ways. Orders were still followed, but not always without question. Missions were still completed, but the unity behind them was starting to break. Some warriors began to notice that not everyone believed in the same future anymore. The Empire still spoke of perfection, but the meaning of perfection was no longer the same for all of them. A divide started forming between those who wanted to continue endless expansion and those who began to wonder if expansion had already gone too far. One side believed stopping meant decay. The other side feared that never stopping meant self-destruction. Neither group spoke openly at first. In the Viltrumite world, disagreement was dangerous. Speaking against the Empire could be seen as betrayal, and betrayal was punished without hesitation. So instead of words, tension grew in silence. Fights during training became more intense, not out of discipline, but out of frustration. Commands were followed with less respect. Trust between warriors slowly weakened, replaced by suspicion. Even longtime allies started to question each other's loyalty. Every glance carried meaning. Every delay felt intentional. Every mistake felt like a sign of something deeper. At the same time, distant reports from conquered worlds began to change the mood further. Some planets, instead of breaking completely, were showing strange signs of resistance in new ways. Not full rebellion, but persistence. Cultures that refused to disappear. People who continued to survive in hidden corners. To some Viltrumites, this was meaningless noise. To others, it felt like a warning that their control was not as absolute as they believed. This growing uncertainty created something the Empire had never truly experienced before. Doubt inside its strongest warriors. Not fear of defeat in battle, but fear that their purpose itself might be flawed. A few began to question if strength alone was enough to define existence. Others rejected this idea completely and saw it as corruption that needed to be removed immediately. The conflict was no longer just about planets or territory. It was about belief. Two visions of the same empire started to form. One still believed in total domination, endless conquest, and the removal of all weakness everywhere. The other began to quietly imagine a different future, one where strength did not require constant destruction. This idea was dangerous not because it was strong, but because it was persuasive. It did not need force. It only needed thought,